Welcome to Cancer and Peace Moments. This is Peter. These moments are 15-minute clips of the larger episodes. Blessings.
I'm going to let you share a little bit of your opening thoughts, Peter,
Sure.
and then we'll get cranking on it.
First of all, I'm not even sure what the difference is between a facilitator and a host, but I am the host, right? And you're the facilitator.
The host is the big dog. The facilitator is just here to make you look
I
good.
didn't feel like a big dog, but anyway.
My job is to make you look good, Peter.
All right. So, yeah, this is a great topic. And, even for individuals who don't call Jesus or God as their higher power and don't adhere to like an Orthodox Christian faith, it's still a fascinating story to look at the literature, the biblical literature of the book of Job. And I know it's interpreted several ways, but I like sort of more of a literal interpretation of that book as I do the scriptures. And so my assumption is there was a real guy, historical figure named Job, and this is what happened to him. And this book was actually one of the first books in the canon. As far as, chronologically, historically. So it dates back. And it's interesting because it's not just an Old Testament book, but it's also mentioned in Job as an individual mentioned in the New Testament. In fact, in the book of James, where he is really applauded for having endurance, for having the quality of endurance, which means patience under suffering. And so he is a revered man in the Jewish faith and also in the Christian faith. And by way of saying that, we have this really interesting book out of the Old Testament where if you could do a play of this or a movie of this, the opening scene, you might have Job in the opening scene. He's considered a man of great respect, a very righteous man, a guy who followed the law and loved God, Jehovah, and was really revered for what he owned. He owned a lot of assets in those days. It would have been it would have been animals and structures and maybe vineyard and all that kind of stuff. And he had 10 children, so he was this man of great wealth and depth, and he had a wonderful reputation, not only with men but also with humans, but also with God, because he's referred to by God as a righteous man. So maybe the opening scene would be Job and who he is and what he is, this man of great respect and renown, and then all of a sudden you shift to a scene in the heavenlies.
The important piece for us, I think, in this moment,
right,
as we think about this, and I think the reason why we'd be talking about this in the
yes.
cancer concept,
Mm-hmm.
or in a cancer and peace concept or discussion, is there's purpose.
Yes.
All suffering has purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. And so we see that discussion between God and Satan, and God actually knows Job's heart, but he also knows that Job has deep purpose that he actually wants to use in a big way in his life and reveal.
Yeah, and of course, Sean, this is a huge topic of the role of pain and suffering in our lives, and within the Christian community and outside the Christian community. And I think you've heard me say, but early on, when I was struggling with my dark nights of the soul, my wall, my earthquake event of that one surgery, I got down to, because I had to sift it through a theological framework, because I need that.
Mm-hmm.
I need to have a something about God that I can sink my teeth into. And so what I came down with and it was based on Job and Paul and Peter and all that, was that my cancer diagnosis, my cancer event, had filtered through God's hands first, that he had allowed it to happen. He didn't cause the harm in the sense of cancer didn't originate from him, but he allowed that to happen to me because of what he wanted to have happen in me.
There's a great, I mean, we're talking a bit
Yeah.
of theology, but I think this is important because when we think about purpose, hope, moving towards peace,
Yeah.
understanding a little bit, I think is, to me, for my own sufferings, has been important. You know, thinking about where we're at today and
Yeah.
just understanding just the starting point probably is the good things. Like suffering is something that it had, you said it a second ago. I think this is such an important point. It had to cross God's desk, so to speak.
Mhm.
And so the fact that it has crossed God's desk, and we know that God only has good purposes for your life, means that whatever suffering is there has a deep, meaningful purpose. And I think this is important because we talked about in the last episodes how purpose goes to hope, goes to peace. Like there's a progression that you move through. And without hope, there is no peace. And without purpose, there's no hope.
Mhm.
And so, because if we live purposeless lives, if they have no meaning, then that's a hopeless existence. But the moment there's purpose to what's going on, then there's hope for tomorrow. And when there's hope for tomorrow,
That's right.
there comes a deep peace. And that's kind of the journey we're trying to walk
Yeah.
down through. And so,
Right.
as we explore Job's journey a little bit, I think we're going to see some of those pieces click into place a little bit.
Yes, because just to pick up on the story very briefly right now, when God said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" and he gave Satan permission to do certain things to Job, there was a limit
Yes.
eventually placed on it. You cannot take his life. But he gave Job permission. I mean, God gave Satan permission to do a lot of other stuff. And the narrative of the story is that a great storm came in and all his children passed in a storm, right? And he lost his wealth. How'd that happen again? Is just
Yeah,
wherever.
there was fire, hurricane,
Right.
it was storm, and yeah.
Right. And, it's interesting because God allowed the enemy to inflict that stuff by those means.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to this book. And
There is, and
not everything I understand, but
even before we even get too far
yeah.
to that depth, is something that sticks out to me early on.
Mhm.
And it kind of fits into something I mentioned earlier, but it's this idea of why suffering. And one of the things that you might think, as we were talking about it from the opposite, hey, is my suffering a punishment?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is no, that
Mhm.
your suffering is not a punishment. But the opposite is potential, that, when you grow to a certain place in your journey, you see that God allows the righteous to take on more suffering. And
Mhm.
the journey towards God is a journey of death to our carnal self, to ourself. And so I think what we see is God allows even more suffering for the righteous, and not for purposes of harming them, but for purposes of even drawing them even closer and nearer still. And so
deep.
that can be really encouraging. It can be scary too, because I find this to be a scary concept, because I want to grow deeper in my relationship with God and in that peace and closeness. But that likely means that I have to embrace more suffering. And this is a biblical concept in Christianity. It's like,
Mhm.
take up your cross, take up your suffering and follow me.
Yeah.
And the closer I get, the more I recognize that it is a journey of suffering also. And outside of Western Christianity, this is understood, I think, a lot better than in
Mhm.
our world, because we have this idea of take up your pleasure and I'm still going to follow, and so we find ways to find deep pleasure and meaning in the things that we have. And the story of Job is being stripped of everything.
And this is the James, I'm going to speak in church, and it's the James 1:2-4 message. It's the brothers and sisters, so Christians, when trials come your way, not if, it's when, consider it all joy.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Blessings.